What's up guys, and welcome to the first episode of a brand new series called the Dark Souls 3 PvP Encyclopedia. So we want this series to become a collective of knowledge gathered from the community, and we'll be looking at certain weapons, builds, and even look at some of the game's mechanics too. In this series we'll probably go over things you already know, maybe from in-game experience or from other players and YouTubers, but we want it to be a complete package, so you might see some things you know from other sources. But let's get right into it. Today's episode I want to take a look at Valorheart, and Valorheart's one of the new weapons added in with the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. This weapon is a reward for defeating the Gravetendle's champion and Great Wolf. This weapon cannot be buffed or infused, and it has a total AR of about 386 at 40 strength and 40 dexterity. So Valorheart has this unique property where it blocks during its attacking animations, and this is true for all of its attacks except the running attack and the R2. The blocking at the start, if timed well, lets you land a pretty nice counter combo, and that's really the greatest strength of this weapon. Now you guys can probably guess from the length of the video that this weapon has a lot to talk about, and it really does. I played around in the arena with this weapon for hours against a variety of different weapons and builds, so I feel that by now I have this weapon pretty much down. But before I tell you how to make a build for this weapon, I want to go over the pros and cons, because I think it should help you at least see why you should build it the way I suggest. And I do like to end on a high note, so I'll start with the weapon's list of drawbacks. First off, if you're hit during the first or last few frames on the blocking part of your attacks, you will remain stuck in the block and your attack won't follow through. You'll probably see this happen most frequently against fast weapons like daggers and curved swords, because they're actually pretty difficult to counter as you see them. You probably want to use a little bit of prediction against these weapons. Although the blocking on this weapon, when timed effectively, can land a good counter, you should keep in mind that the shield isn't too great. It lacks in stability and overall protection when compared to other shields of similar stats. So when you do counterattack, keep in mind that it will cost you extra stamina if you block their attack on top of the cost for your attack. And the chip damage through the shield also makes it a bad weapon to use when you're at a low amount of health. However, the way you use this weapon is similar to trading with hyper armor, except instead of taking the raw attack and swing through like most ultra weapons require, you take far less damage and you take stamina damage instead. So it works similarly to hyper armor, but with an emphasis on stamina damage over health cost. And that actually brings us on to another downfall. Because of the amount of stamina and health that you will lose going up against larger weapons, it's probably a bad idea to use Valorheart. I didn't have too much trouble dealing with them once I figured the weapon out, but it's definitely a tough matchup. Weapons like greatswords, especially curved greatswords and great hammers, do a ton of stamina damage, sometimes leaving you with very little to actually return with. Another issue could be that you go up against a good player who will just outspace you the entire fight, and in these fights I suggest you try to be more aggressive and don't give them the room that they're looking for. Valorheart's range leaves a little to be desired. It is fairly short, but there's enough forward momentum on the initial R1 that it does have deceptive range. It's still short, but it's longer than most people expect, and it does catch people off guard. The rolling attack is probably the worst attack this weapon has. It aims too high, so its range is very short and it rarely hits anything. I'd avoid using this attack in general unless you have time to unlock and free aim it a little bit lower. Another issue is that the straight sword category of weapons typically have a guard break as their weapon art, and this can be a problem and you'll need to play around it because they can guard break you out of your attack animation if they hit your blocking frames, and of course then they're going to riposte you. Now, I saved this negative for last because the rest is something that you as a player can work around with smart play, but this one just completely breaks the weapon. Lag. If there's a high amount of lag, the main strength of the weapon becomes useless. The connection won't allow you to block their attack and counterattack, which usually means you take a bunch of damage for no reason. The other side of that being, you try to predict their actions and eat the attack and land a small trade that's probably in their favour. Unfortunately, lag is out of your control, so switch off of Valorheart if you keep going up against people from different regions with terrible internet. Okay, so that was a long list of negatives. However, this weapon is worth using. I've been loving this weapon and it's actually very fun. So let's get into the weapon's strengths this time around. So right away, this weapon's unique ability to block during the beginning of its attacks. I honestly think this is a hard counter to katanas. You can just R1 through the running attack, trade some chip damage for a combo and repeat until you win. I find this weapon destroys players who play aggressively or use short range weapons. Wait for your opponent to attack and then time your block to trade the chip damage for your combo. And I've got a couple of combos that are reliable and I'll get to those soon. Next positive is the jumping attack. It's probably the best jumping attack in the game. It comes out very quickly and has very little recovery. It covers a pretty considerable distance, so much that it can catch players who roll out of your combo, and you also block during the jump attack, so that means you cannot be counter hit unlike other jumping attacks. So I cannot stress enough how strong this attack is. And this weapon also uses very little stamina for its own attacks. The main source of stamina cost will be dependent on what weapon your opponent uses, but you can usually land a full attack after blocking and still have enough stamina to roll out. And a well-timed block with this weapon against the opening attack in the duel could win it for you early. In fact, if you get a decent health lead against another player, you probably won't lose. Counter-attacking and following that up with jump attacks will help you keep the pressure on after the opening combo, making it really tough for your opponent to recover safely. Now, the weapon art for Valorheart is also kind of interesting. While holding L2 you'll block, and by pressing R1 you'll shoot forward and cover a short distance while blocking, and at the end of it you'll do a thrusting attack. It's a good gap closer and it can work well to catch people at the end of their rolls. The R2 weapon art is a shield bash that has this lion roar and it projects a lion's face as well. It does very high stamina damage to a blocking opponent, definitely breaking their guard if they use anything less than a great shield, and it can even break the guard of low stability great shields. If the R2 weapon art hits a player who isn't blocking, it will stagger them so that you can hit them with an R1. Now keep in mind that the game generally won't let you land the second R1, so instead of throwing out another R1, use an R2 or a jump attack instead. And that honestly does it for the positives, and I know I outlined way more negatives, but this weapon is completely unique and it has its strengths and weaknesses, and in my opinion, the few strengths it has outweigh the weaknesses. So now let's talk about how you should build for it. Now I would say 40 Vigour and 40 Endurance are a minimum, and I'd strongly suggest you use the Ring of Favour and the Chloranthe Ring. And now because the weapon can't be buffed, the only way to get damage out of it is really to build strength and dexterity, and I also say go 40-40. In fact, I find these stats mandatory if you want to get all you can out of the weapon. If you pick Warrior as your starting class, this should put you at around, I think it's soul level 116. And that gives you 4 levels to put into whatever you like to meet the 120 meta. And if you're having issues with stamina regen, I'd say put on a grass shield, because this way it'll go on your back when you use Valorheart, and you'll still get the stamina recovery bonus from the shield, and lighter equipment weight also helps with stamina recovery. But as for how to use the weapon, you want to be passive in the beginning and wait for a good opportunity to attack. So against light weapons like katanas, straight swords and curved swords, I find the best attack to exploit for the counter to be either the rolling or running attacks, because they don't have a second attack in their combo and there's a better chance of you stunning them on the counter. Against heavy weapons, play carefully and use your jump attack often, try to outspace their attacks and close the distance with jump attacks. If they one-hand, treat it like a straight sword, you really only need to worry about them two-handing as the stamina and health damage you'll take will be much higher. Ultra Great Sword you really shouldn't have a problem with, they're so slow that I wouldn't even try to trade with it. I'd just use Valorheart as if it were any other sword in that situation. Also, due to the nature of the arena and everyone being unembered for whatever reason, Valorheart is incredibly strong as a single 3-hit combo, will do about 650 to 800 damage, and most players only have about 800 to 1000 health unembered. So some of the combos that I've discovered to be reliable are, it's just the basic straight sword combo, R1, R1, R2. The exact same combo, but R1, R1 jump attack. And again, the same combo but with an added jump attack after the R2, so that would be R1, R1, R2, then jump attack. Because it seems the distance covered by the R2 and then the speed of the jumping attack it lets you land this combo pretty consistently. I don't know if it's 100% guaranteed, some people have escaped it, but it's a consistent combo. And there's another combo where you can use the weapon art R2, to stun them if they like roll into you. Then you can hit them with an R1, then a jump attack, because as I said earlier, the game won't let you chain 2 R1s after the weapon art stagger. So to sum up Valorheart, it's a weapon designed for counter-attacking, where timing and stamina management are the 2 most important aspects of its use. Now, I use the term counter-attacking instead of passive, because to me typical passive play keeps the same tempo. This weapon, however, once you land the counter, you speed up and you keep the aggression on until the fight resets. I would say that it could take some getting used to. I definitely had trouble with being guard broken early on in my playtime with the weapon, but once I had a rough idea of how much stamina I would lose per attack, it all sort of fell into place. And I love this weapon. I think it's my new favourite weapon in Dark Souls 3. I like it way more than any other weapon in the DLC, and I really recommend that you guys try this out. But that's it for this video analysing Valorheart. Let me know if I missed anything. I think I covered everything, but better to be safe than sorry. I hope you guys liked this video, as ever. I hope you learned something new or had some suspicions confirmed, and definitely give this weapon a try. It's a lot of fun. But I'm out here, guys, so I'll see you guys in the next video.